I'm Tom Patton. I'm a global black belt. That doesn't mean that you're going to see any fancy karate moves up here today. But what that means is I'm a technical specialist that helps customers and partners understand how to adopt our offerings, and my focus is on project service automation. A little bit of background on myself. So I've been with Microsoft for about 15 years. And I've been most of that time in the engineering discipline as a program manager working on different products. And it's funny because I've actually worked on a lot of different work management systems. So I worked on Visual Studio Team Foundation Server when it first came out back in 2006. I've worked on the AX project management and accounting in 2012 release. And then since its origination about 3 years back, I've been working on project service automation. When we initially released that to market, I transitioned into a field role and have spent the last year in Europe working with customers and partners, activating that business and getting our early wins there. And that's been a real exciting adventure for me and for my family. But now we've moved back, and I'm in Seattle doing a similar role here in the Americas. So I want to keep this session interactive. We got a lot of days in these rooms here. I think it's always more fun, and I certainly enjoy the opportunity to learn from people as much as we hopefully all can walk away learning something new. I want to be among those people. So there's microphones here. Please don't hesitate to ask a question. If you've got a question, probably other people have the same one, and we can kind of keep it interactive. No need to hold them to the end. Just pop up or shout them out, and I can repeat them on the mic here. So let's talk a little bit about origins and about where we came from and where we're going with project service automation. You know, we've been in this business for a long time at Microsoft of helping project teams succeed, and we have lots of different technologies across the organization that are really aimed at that objective. And you can see a lot of change and coalescing of those technologies over the past few years. So you see the evolution of, in our collaboration space, the movement towards teams and the way that the productivity and collaboration investments are being made over there. And you see the continued success of our project business and Project Online and the history that we bring in terms of project management discipline and capabilities in that product line. And a place that we've also had that, and another thing that I was involved in prior to PSA, is in our operations module of Dynamics 365, or formerly Dynamics AX. And PSA really was about taking the experiences that we have across those different assets in Microsoft and applying them more specifically to our customer engagement platform. So, customer engagement is, it's not just about sales, it's about, service delivery, and it's about responding to some of these challenges that we see in the marketplace. So when we looked at kind of where we were with our portfolio and where these challenges are, we actually worked with a few analysts to try to focus our efforts and understand the best way to continue to innovate and improve there. And some of those areas were really about retention of clients and the way that you differentiate your brand, the way that the workforce is changing and moving towards a decrease in billable employees across many project-based businesses and towards contract labor, the desire to retain the skill that you've got in your organization. And we looked at these and decided that it was important for us to have an offering that wasn't completely about finance only or general ledger or all of the financial management projects, but really was tied into those customer retention, customer engagement components that I mentioned. And this SPI research that kind of backs up these and has some of these numbers were some of the drivers behind that. And let's see if I. So if we look at what are those KPIs, and we'll talk a lot about this. If I think about project service automation, one thing you can think about is sort of what's in a name, right? Project service automation, its acronym is PSA. It's shared with an industry acronym that many people would associate with professional services automation, and it does do those things, right? It does automate the requirements of a professional services organization, throughout the life cycle of the business processes that they run. But it's it's more than that. It involves other sorts of projects that may be related to other offerings that we have, things like projects that are not professional services. So we've got a field service offering. Whatever it is that you're servicing in the field, whatever equipment it is that you're servicing in the field and billing for that kind of service, it very well may be that it needs installation or refurbishment sort of activities to complement that on-site service. So project service automation, as opposed to strictly PSA, can augment those kind of scenarios where your service extends from a simple on-site visit that a field technician might do to a refurbishment or an installation. Or sales. Sales might also share that attribute. If you're engaged in long-running sales and you want to capture the cost of goods sold, you want to assemble the right team, you want to put a project together to sell jet engines or bridges or enterprise software or any other sort of long-running pursuit, you can put a team together and manage that in a project and understand the costs and the overall ROI that you have on those sales efforts. But really, when we did look at project professional services and what are those drivers that can influence our roadmap here, we did turn, as I mentioned, to SPI Research and some of the great work that they've done in going out and engaging with professional services organizations, primarily in North America, and getting a pulse on what is top of mind for those business leaders. And these are the typical sorts of things: the bid-to-win ratio, what's the utilization of your employees, are you delivering within the expectations of the customer, and are you maintaining a healthy profit? And these KPIs, as you see between this top 20% versus the other 80%, really are distinguished by a set of characteristics and behaviors inside of the organization that really makes the difference between returning a positive financial impact to your organization and losing money. So we put the offering together with the idea that this tool set, with connections into Office 365 and with connections into customer engagement systems, can help these sorts of organizations move up that ladder. I always think it's interesting to look at it. I mean, it is a tool set. It's not a panacea, right? It's a starting point, but it's something to grab onto and use in your organizations to drive the kind of behaviors that can move you from that bottom 80% into the top 20% and return and exhibit the kind of difference that we see in these metrics across those different groups. So again, to kind of recap the areas that were really motivating us to bring this offering out, a year or so back, 18 months now, I guess. A deepened engagement with customers. And if you think about the customer engagement platform in Dynamics 365, that's really about things like, well, we can extend our project status out to a portal so that people can see what the status is without getting an email. We can extend that quote out onto a portal. We can use all of the relationship analytics, the email monitoring, all of the functions that we have in the Dynamics 365 platform to strengthen that delivery component and deepen that customer engagement for not only product-based teams but project-based teams, throughout the life cycle of delivery. Next is really empowering teams. So, I mentioned at the beginning sort of this big portfolio of team-focused, collaboration-focused functionality that we have across the company. So making that bridge from the structured processes that we manage in Dynamics 365 out to the less structured world of documents and chats and meetings and Skypes and all that sort of stuff is another area that we really believe is important for any project team, whether it's professional services or whether it's a delivery team of some other nature. And then the third is optimizing growth. And I think this is another area where it's super important to consider, if you're not looking at profit margins, at plans that are in concert between the sales functions in your organization and the delivery functions in the organization, you may be choosing projects that are less than profitable to execute on. You may not be seeing what kind of skills and resources you're going to need 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road in order to meet the demands in your sales pipeline. So optimizing growth is really about getting those insights early during the sales process as to what you need in terms of profitability and resources. So everyone has seen this slide, but I will go through it a little bit because it's important, I think, to place project service automation within the context of the broader Dynamics 365 set of capabilities. And I'll just kind of reiterate some of those connections that we have to field service and customer service and sales. But it's also important, those connections that I've mentioned already, out to Office 365, the ability to extend those base functions with Power Apps, connect to other systems with Flow and the Common Data Service, and to bring the power of Power BI, IoT in the case of those non-professional services automation projects, and Cortana Intelligence to bear on this segment of the population, and also our app source investments that can help our ISV partners provide more verticalized solutions on top of PSA. So if we drill into PSA, and we're going to look at this, we'll spend the most of the time today in demonstration of the product. But basically, like I mentioned, it's sort of end-to-end from opportunity management through to service analytics, and really opening up the Dynamics customer engagement platform to a collection of new players and personas that are important to this kind of a process. So if you think, a few years back, before, as Dynamics 365 kind of was germinating and coming into being, the CRM offering was, sales and service, salespeople and customer service representatives, main people who were concerned. So really, we're extending that out to team members who are going to be doing time and expense, and practice managers and executives who maybe aren't just concerned about sales, but they're also concerned about delivery metrics, resource managers who are understanding about who they've got and who's on the bench and how they can better utilize their employees. So let's talk about the connection then to the broader world of both Dynamics 365 and Office. If you look at opportunity management, this has got a connection directly into the sales app. So, is PSA, it can work if you've got an alternative Salesforce automation solution. You can pick it up from sort of 80% certain this is going forward, move it into PSA, and manage that process for going forward to there. But in terms of having a single source of truth and a world where there's no integration between these different worlds, it's one and the same. The opportunity management inside of PSA is the opportunity management that you have in the sales app, right? It's a set of new extensions and forms and business logic that extends that core for projects, businesses, but it's all the same system running in the same environment. The next one is field service. So I mentioned before sort of the synergies between project service and field service, and I think this is always an interesting time to kind of reflect on, again, how PSA came to being and where we're going with it in the future. But we were building PSA inside of Microsoft at the time that we then decided to get into the field service business, and we acquired a company called Field One. And at that time, it wasn't clear how we would take things forward, and it's been super interesting because we basically combined that into a single offering around the things that are common between those businesses. Fundamentally, that's like resources, their skill sets, their calendars, their availability, what can they do, what should they be doing. It also has a lot of commonality in the kind of financial transactions that are generated when you do field service and when you do project delivery. So we did a lot of work there to bring those two solutions together, and now we have something that I think is truly differentiating in the marketplace in this connection between field service and project service that can take the same skilled resources that may be out there delivering, fulfilling work order requirements, fixing items. But then when that fix is a week long and you need to have that single contract that talks about how you fix things, how you refurbish things, alongside how you service them, and a single set of resources that can provide both of those functions, that can really help organizations increase their utilization of those resources. And again, that's going to be your top knob towards profitability. So that connection between PSA and field service, super important for us. Customer billing tying into operations. So most of you know that we have our finance and operations capabilities. There is project functionality over there in the operations workload as well. That's where your general ledger is living. That's where your receivables activities would take place. PSA works well with operations, either from an integration standpoint. So we'll look today at how that looks when you look at the transactions that are coming out and how that relates to operations. Either operations or any other system that is basically a ledger-based system that's looking at costs and revenues and how they're distributed throughout organizations and attributed to projects. So we are working on first-party integration using the Common Data Service to tie those together as an out-of-the-box capability, but we've got lots of partners who are doing that today using standard integration technologies, and again, that's sort of an evolving story here in Dynamics 365. Our customer insights functionality, which I don't know if anyone's seen any of this stuff, seen any of the customer insights shows this. A lot of interesting things going on there, and the analytics that we have, we'll take a look at that. We have this data export service, which will take all the information from Dynamics 365 and put it into SQL Azure, so you can use Power BI on top, and that's kind of the basis for a lot of the customer insights stuff that we are coming out with. Microsoft Project. So PSA works with the Microsoft Project client. So for people who want to use the client to manipulate the project plan and use the full power of that, we'll look at the project planning functions and estimation capabilities of PSA today. But if you want the real power tools, sort of industry standard on how to plan and manipulate projects, you can use it in conjunction with the Microsoft Project client. Clicker. Office 365, so we'll take a look at this also in the demonstration. But project teams are not successful because they enter time. They're successful because they have what they need in terms of who to talk to, what's been going on in the project historically, what files and deliverables do I need to be working on. And so our connection between projects and Office 365 is super important for us. Microsoft Exchange, so how do we make that bridge from somebody's calendar that they live and die by, they look at every day, and the work that they're doing that's billable or that's at least collecting cost on projects? How can we make sure that somebody knows where they're supposed to be by putting all their bookings into Exchange? Or how do we know, what somebody has done by harvesting the information outside of Exchange and putting it into the business system? And then Power BI across the gamut. So, lots of people look at this and they say, well, I've got an expense management solution already that I want to keep using, or I've got Salesforce and I'm going to keep using that at least for a while. I've got a billing system. I've got these different things in place. You can use these things independently and glue them in. The 365 platform has good integration capabilities for those kinds of scenarios. But this service analytics and Power BI, of course, it's just less of a project and more of a SaaS solution when you use more of the solution, because all those relationships, all those data are coming in cohesively from the get-go. So let's just talk a little bit before we get into the demonstration about some recent customers, and I wish I had the ability to put these logos up and have the customers come on stage. Most of these are in the advanced stages of deployment right now. We're going to give them a little time to be happy and live, and then we'll put them on here and have some more case studies. I can refer you to a few case studies of folks that are active today. But just segmenting our market and our approach to customers this way is also helpful for you to have a look at. So the first sort of examples is in our professional services core. So this is your sort of end-to-end play, right, of opportunity and estimation all the way through billing. And so we just kind of look at IT consulting, management consulting, AEC, media, tax. We've got folks in all of these industries in active projects on PSA. We've got them across all geographies. So I thought I'd pick out a few of these. One is in Singapore, an IT consulting organization of about 1,200 folks who is using PSA in a small group and getting bigger to manage their projects from lead to invoice. Another is in the Netherlands, an accounting firm that is looking at going from lead to invoice here. So those are sort of those full ticket, end-to-end professional services core sorts of examples. Oops. The next one is that field and project service. So I think, take this and think about it if you're a partner and you're working with field service, or if you're a company, a manufacturing organization that's deploying customer assets and servicing them, and then you need to recondition them. Some of the great things we've got going on here, we've got in Finland, we've got a mining company, mining services company that is taking, basically you look at field service and you think about the guy in the van going around installing cable boxes or fixing HVAC equipment or medical devices or whatever that is. In this mining services example, it was more like, no, 5 guys get on an airplane and they fly out and they have to go through a complete checklist of all of these items and record the status of these machines, and it's multiple people over multiple days delivering that kind of on-site service. And so the project service components are a great addition to that kind of a customer scenario where you're really partially between a dispatch-oriented on-site service and long-term projects. This one, we actually do have a published case study on the German security firm. This is Allegion, and they are installing and monitoring security environments on premises. And so this is another great example of, like, they came shopping for customer service and field service, and project service sort of completes the picture there, because when one of those monitors on site becomes defective, they have IoT signal that's going to help them provide that proactive break-fix kind of service. And they have case management requirements that require them to respond to calls and things. But when they go to do an installation, this is something that project service is great at, because it's going to take 2-3 weeks, involve multiple people. And so that's more of a project scenario. And then the third area that we've seen some good traction in over the past year is in internal projects. And this one's an interesting one, because for lots of times, if you're doing classic portfolio management of cost projects in an IT department or something similar to that, our PPM solution is tailor-built for this, right? And we've got lots of customers up on Project Online who are doing that. So you kind of got to look at these offerings and look at your customer situation, look at your own situation, and understand, well, are these things that are like, a sales process, a long-running sales process? Is there cross-charging involved? Those are the kinds of elements that within Dynamics, the project management functionality can help address. So we've got a pretty large bank here in the United States that are managing their internal projects like this, and a big part of that is the cross-charging component of that, and so that's why it was a good fit for them. So with that, we're going to go into a demonstration, but why don't we see, is there any questions or comments before I get going? I feel like I've been talking for a while. Anyone got any thoughts or questions? Nope? Okay, let's switch gears and have a look. All right, so I'm gonna let, I was just talking to these folks over here. We are really close to the next release of Dynamics 365. Oops, that's not working, is it? What do I need to do to? There we go. So we're really close to having the next release of Dynamics 365 out. We'll see this out, I believe it's the first week of October, is what I heard and can repeat now in an earlier session. And I actually had some time to be playing around with it. I'll point out oh, still not working. Can we have a look? Well, I've just got a web browser here. I've got it on the screen down here, but it's not showing up here. Yeah, so I actually was hoping to walk through that new version with you today, but due to some technical issues with the network here and the super secret location of our pre-release software, I could not access it here. So if anyone does, oh, I can't drive it from over there. Oh yeah, that'll work, I guess. I can manage that. I can make that happen. Yeah, so we're going to look at the in-market version today, and I'll kind of mention some of the areas that we've made some improvements in the upcoming release, and yeah, we'll have some new demo assets to walk through. Yeah, I'm done with that. So I don't know if we just Windows P and get that. Here, let's see if what's this say here? Duplicate. Oh, I can make that happen. Is that recording? Which ones are getting recorded on the screencast? Okay, perfect. That's good. Okay. So let's start off talking about the end state a little bit. So I mentioned that end-to-end process. I always think it's a little interesting to start by what kind of benefits can we drive, what kind of insights can we get into organizations if you are using that end-to-end. Because lots of organizations today that I talk to, I mean, some you're coming from an old system, some you're coming from a patchwork of different systems, some you're coming from a collection of emails and spreadsheets and things like that. So one of the big advantages of using a PSA system from end to end is really the analytics that come out of the whole process. So that's what we're looking at right now. So basically, this is a view of a set of default models that we ship with the product that can be extended, customized for your own use, or extended with new data sources. And if you just kind of start and look across the bottom here, what we've done is taken a lot of the experience that we've had over the years and tried to build in some of those core KPIs that most organizations want to have as a starting point. And Power BI is great because, like, if you just take this one, this gross margin, and say, here's my customer producing the largest impact on my bottom line. And when I look at that customer, it's easy for me to tell what disciplines in my organization are having the best impact there. And if you just think about that, like, where is the catalog of roles and skills in your organization, and is it connected to their cost price and their sales price and your customer in a way that lets you understand that these are the developers and technical consultants in this organization that have contributed that positive return within the context of that deal. And you'll see that across a lot of common things. So revenue by customer, revenue by resource, everybody's favorite, cost versus estimates. So what was the original estimate that I thought was going to happen? What were the actual costs as it came in? And that ability to slice and dice and drill down and drill across and figure out what's right in your organization, what's wrong in your organization is true across all these domains. If we look at another area, let's say resource management. How many folks in here who are in a consulting organization would have a difficulty answering, how many unmet hours of functional consultants do I have, and how does that separate across the geographies? Only one person. So we do have a couple of level 5 CMMI masters in here who know everything about their resource influx, but most folks, that demand is squirreled away in a bunch of emails to resource managers and limited to the Thursday afternoon horse trading meeting of who should be working on what project and what do we need to do next month to be successful. And same thing across account management and that funnel of opportunities and what my revenue pipeline is. So we've had this sort of stuff in CRM for a long time, but as it relates to revenue forecasted by labor that's defined by rates and by fixed price arrangements. Those kinds of things are new with PSA. So if we kind of take that as the analytics at the end of the rainbow, if you're executing that end-to-end process that we talked about using a single system, that's the kind of intelligence you can drive. Now let's take a look at that process from beginning to end. So for those of you who are kind of just kicking around with Dynamics 365, this is the web client that we're looking at. Project service, I'm an admin. You won't have these many tiles on your, all your people wouldn't have this many tiles on your environment. But this is sort of all the different components within project service. And as you can see, it's just another module within the customer engagement platform. And so I'm sitting here as maybe a salesperson at the beginning of that funnel, taking a look at the My Opportunities, within the 365 environment. Really easy to make a different kind of filtering and column selection and share that out with people so that people are looking at the same list of things, whether that's projects, resources, or opportunities. And really easy to get a visual handle on that. So if I want to look at the tip of my funnel here and drill in on which ones are most important to me, and then maybe sort this by revenue to bring my highest impact up to the top. This is maybe where I want to spend some time looking into this opportunity. So the opportunity specifically here is all about, so again, my example here is going to be about delivering a consulting project, like a CRM implementation. And here we see sort of the standard Dynamics business process flow. So that's really important for a lot of bidding organizations. Like, how do I go through the initial opportunity identification, through the go, no go stage, through resourcing, and through discounting and all that kind of stuff. So everywhere across the framework, you're going to always have this kind of a process flow. You can build this using a graphical user interface that defines, when does it branch, when does it say, oh, if the discount is this big, you need this kind of approval, all that sort of stuff. You can put security across these fields to make sure that only the right people are manipulating them. But if we dig into, beyond sort of the block and tackle of opportunity management, managing your activities, putting together your stakeholder map, assembling your sales team, et cetera, into what is it that we've captured in terms of demand for this customer. We see we've captured both project-oriented work and the associated anticipated billing methods that we're going to use, so some consulting work and some development work, as well as product-based. So anything that is a catalog item or a subscription, that is stuff that remains product-focused. That's the sort of what we've had always in the CRM system. And we're just combining those two things together. And then we're providing the ability to say, within the context of this opportunity, I might put together different deal formats to say how I want to present this out to the customer. And in my case, I've put together a couple of different formats. And if we look at one of those quotations, we can see sort of what makes it tick. The key thing about having sales and delivery, the people who are estimating the project and all that kind of stuff, working in the same system, is all about these metrics up at the top. So we have a whole pricing system in PSA that is based on hourly rates, day rates, roles, and their cost prices and their sales prices. And that's combined, if you look down here, at the actual plans that my delivery end is putting together, the estimates that I'm putting together. And based on that, I am able to tell here that I have a, frankly, ridiculously high profit margin. This is the business you want to be in. And that I am, pretty good on my customer expectations. I may be currently forecasting a late delivery, but I'm within budget. I can get more details down here if I sort of just look at the delivery expectations, where we have that green line representing what the budget was or what the current quote is, and the yellow line meaning what the budget is. So that's where we see that we're a little bit high on this one, but our timeline over here looks good. So we've got that profitability information and that customer sat information baked into the quote, so that, again, if we kind of return back to page 1 of the presentation, we talk about those metrics that you need to drive. choosing the right projects to move forward with, the ones that you're going to make money on, basically. So the connection then between these individual quote lines, like if we open up one of these, this is what we're really presenting to the customer, right? And so you can see this is a pretty simple presentation, and I'm not going to show the portal today, but you could scoop out which columns that you want here and have your customer log in and look at this quote and understand what the sales values are, of this quote. But you see the format that I'm doing here is just kind of role, amount, and total. And that is determined by maybe what's a more complicated planning structure that's actually in my project. And the two are tied together so that I can just use this import from project estimates and say, look, I want to orient my project. I don't want to show any of the detail of my work breakdown structure. I just want to show it, by role. So let's go ahead and bring in my estimates like that. And that is what is populating these roles down here. So I've just taken the freshest information from my estimate, and I've reoriented it towards the way that I want to communicate that out to my customer. So what is that estimate and how does it work? Let's just hop over to the project itself and take a look. So again, anywhere in 365, you're going to see our friendly business process flow up here. And this one's connected, right? So it knows that I'm in the quote stage. So that's where my little flag is. You can see that this has been built on a standard agile template, so you can really capture those best practices of how you think a project should run, put the right team together, use that as a template, and operate all your projects of a certain flavor on that, so you can compare them together to see their relative performance and all that sort of stuff. So this has been built on that template, and what the template really brings to the table, first and foremost, is the work breakdown structure. Now this is where we kind of have that, you recall that connection between Microsoft Project and PSA. That's where this kind of comes into play. So this one, if you wanted to add new tasks to this, which then can immediately impact my quote, I can come in here and say, well, this is funny because you can see I tried this earlier because I had final stuff. So we're going to do my least favorite phraseology of when somebody sends me a presentation or a quote, and we're going to call it final stuff. Because that's always an indication that you really should have been using OneDrive all along. But if I add a new task here, and I say that's going to be, let's say, 5 days long, and I want this task to be performed by, let's just keep it simple, functional consultant. I could split this across multiple roles. I could have it be long. I could do all sorts of different things here. But the minute that I do this, you'll see now it knows that that's 40 hours based on my calendar. It knows the start date. It knows the end date. I can come in here and put a new dependency on to put that where I want within the project plan. And then when I switch this over into my estimates view, that's going to take any discounting, and we didn't look at the discounting over on the sales side, but we have sales rates that could be either for a customer under the terms of a master services agreement or for a particular deal, and you can control all that pricing there. This is going to take that information and immediately let me see what the financial impact is of that change. So now I can see my cost, the amount that those resource classifications at their standard cost will have in this project is sitting at $68,000. And if I look at the sales amount based on those same things, it's at $100,000. If I look at it as effort, I see those hours that were in my WBS. And I could put this down to days, and I can actually see this, and I can change this on a day-to-day basis within here. So if you want to contour how that work starts between the start date and the end date, you can use this as that edit surface, and it's going to keep everything in sync across those financial estimates and that work plan. So let's go back to the other view of this, the work breakdown structure. And you'll see over here we've got a number where I've already partially staffed this project. So we've got both our roles, which really is the sales amount and the cost amount of that work. And then I've got some that I've already assigned. If I want to say, hey, look, some of my estimates have changed since I secured these resources. If I use this generate project team function, what that does is it says, you could do this from a blank project, you could do it from a partially staffed project. It says all the work demands in this project plan that are not a part of that are not assigned to people, scoop that out and tell me the least number of people that I can do in order to complete the staffing of this project. So here it says, okay, you need another program manager, another functional consultant, and another architect. And if I switch over to my team view, I think I should see all that here. Yeah. So that's where you see these guys like these generic resources. So generic resources is that people placeholder, that team member that we don't know who it is yet. And so when we want to go ahead and staff one of those people, in fact here, this one is the functional consultant. That's the new work that we added onto the plan, so that was some of the unstaffed work. If I want to find out who the best person is for this, I can go into the booking experience. Uh-oh. Why? And see who the best resources are to fulfill this. Now, this is one of those areas that has changed, and so drop by. We don't have the booth tomorrow, so we can't do that. If you would like to see the new functionality here. But basically, this is saying, okay, across the time that you're looking, these 2 weeks, and we need 32 hours the first week, 8 hours the second week. I can look at that as a day by day. In this environment, there's actually nobody is scheduled. That's why we see all those blanks there. So everyone's available. But all the resources have a skill profile. So when I hover over Bernadette, I can see all her skills and competencies. She's really good at accounting and finance. She's okay at CRM. She's okay at ERP. So you can define those skill maps and those competency levels and put them into your organization. You could say, well, these guys both look pretty equal in skills. Let me take a look at them side by side and see which one I really am curious to book. And then at the end of the day, depending on a combination of their availability and their fit of skill, I'm going to select one of those. And of course, you can narrow this down. So if I wanted to say, oh, in addition to that, I need BI and reporting, and apply that. I don't see anyone. If I wanted to say, oh, let's not just look in the US, let's look across the entire organization, I still don't have anyone with those profiles. But once you've identified that right skill and availability match, you can go ahead and select your candidate and book them. And that's the signal to everyone about what that person's doing for how much time going forward. So that's sort of one of the booking scenarios that we've got here, which is pretty straightforward. It's the project manager booking their resources directly on the project. But sometimes there's this sort of gatekeeper in there of a resource manager that needs to sign off and identify the best person to fulfill the project demand. So that's what we can look at next. If we take this next requirement and we look at the resource requirement, basically this piece here, when I open it, it gives me the ability to describe in a structured way that can be routed to the right person for fulfillment all the things that I need to describe about who I'm looking for. So it's already got the start date, the end date, the contour of the work that has been dictated by the project plan, and then I can add in any skills that I need to have them have here. So you guys see a pattern here. I choose things with A because that's easy. I can add, hey, I'd prefer it to be one of these 3 people. Or I would prefer it not to be this person because they don't have a good relationship with the customer, or I don't want them on this project. So I can tell this, which organizational unit should it come from, what roles am I interested in looking for, and then when I submit this, this goes into a full list of resource requests that the organization has. And so this might have been routed to the central person who does all of the fulfillment for a particular region or a particular skill set or a particular role, and they will use that same booking interface that we just looked at to take that resource requirement and fulfill it with the right combination of skills and availability. So I'm going to skip a few stages in our journey here and just let's recap where we've been. So We looked first at the opportunity management. And I just would emphasize for those new to the Dynamics 365 world, there's a lot before that in terms of managing activities, managing that relationship, interacting with LinkedIn, interacting with your email system to make sure that you're getting the business won in the first place. But we looked at that opportunity management component, and then we did the planning component there in the work breakdown structure with the estimation functions, and then the staffing. And there's lots of variants on staffing that I'm not showing here that you can do in terms of the flows of, I ask for somebody, they recommend these two people, the guy doesn't like those two people, so he says no, and that workflow back and forth between the demand side and the fulfillment side. So with those things done, we'll confirm up on our contract, and we will begin actual project execution. And so let's go to a pre-baked project and contract, and we'll look at both of those concepts as we go through. Let's start with the project. And let's talk about project success. And let's have a look here at Office 365. So I mentioned earlier, sometimes I think billing systems, work management systems, you add people to the project team because that lets them enter their timesheet. Like that's why you add them to the team, because that's kind of all you get. But really to set them up for success, that's where we want this bridge over into Office 365. And so this has been really great, both as a user now of the sales component of Dynamics 365, to have this integration into OneDrive and into Exchange and into OneNote and all the tools that I use every day to manage relationships with my customers and to make sure that I've got one place to go to see all those. And the place I like to go best for that is to Outlook. Is to Outlook on my phone, on my iPhone, on my Android phone, on my Windows phone, on my tablet, or here, or even if it's, in some cases, a native calendar app that's on those devices. But what you see here across the left is all of the projects that I'm involved with. So every time I've been added to a team using those staffing capabilities, a new group is, I'm permissioned into this new group. And I can see all of the people, all the members of that group up here that are associated with that. I can immediately go into my files and get access to all those files. I can synchronize that to my local drive on my phone so that even if I'm on an oil derrick with no phone, no wireless access, I still have the schematics that I need to go ahead and be successful on the project. So I see also all of the historical conversations. And this group, and I know there's a question here. Ah, yes, everybody's question. Well, we do need to go to a different session and ask that question more explicitly. But it's, and those two things, there's three things really, right? There's Skype, there's Teams, there's maybe four things. There's Yammer, right? And there's groups. Groups and teams are really the same thing at their heart. Okay, there's no channels in this groups experience, but group membership is the core to all of that. So that group cuts across all the different services. So by doing this, right now there is a separate step involved. I mean, today there is a separate step involved where I would have to go to the Teams client and say, new team, oh, I want to base it on a group. And then they're the same. I'm sure we're going to see an improvement to that. Think of it as the same thing, because what we're really doing here is trying to tie together the things that give organizational insights, management controls, in our structured systems into the agile execution that use the best of breed tools that we have to offer for productivity and collaboration. So consider them the same. There is another button click in there. And just to complete the thought, because I know everybody's got this on their mind all the time, like Yammer, I think, is a great solution for all these things when you're talking to a broader audience. We use it a lot inside of Microsoft, but when we're on a pursuit team or when we're on a project, we're using teams and groups. So broad communication, Yammer. Group of people with a specific goal that has a start and an end, Teams. So that's the way I personally think about it. So that pane of glass, whether it's Teams, And you'll see it there, whether it's groups in Outlook like we just saw, or whether it's in Dynamics. It's the same data back there, and it's the same access rights. So, again, getting into the project is more about being able to register time. You can now register time on that project, of course, but it is also about setting you up for success. So with that, let's assume now we've been staffed. We have access to all the stuff that we need in order to be successful on the project. Of course, we get to now do everyone's favorite activity, which is timesheets and expenses. This is one of the views that we have. We have mobile experience for time and expense that works on all the major mobile platforms. We have a calendar view that you're looking at here. For the old school folks like myself, you can just go into your favorite grid and bang out your 88764 or whatever that you did on your projects that week. But think about each of these different colors, as a different project that is accumulating your cost in the case of a fixed price, or your opportunity cost, and your billable amount in terms of time and material on those different projects. It's not a timesheet like a piece of paper that's all those different people need to look at. When you submit those individual time entries, they get routed to all of the people who are approved to accept cost onto those projects, and then when they approve it, then you start seeing your revenue accruals, you start seeing your cost accumulations on your project. Pretty straightforward stuff here. You're going to classify your time spent into absence or vacation or work. When it's work, you can choose a project. So if I have another couple hours, and this list looks kind of funny because what it shows here is all the projects for which you are a team member. Hopefully no one has a list like this that is this long. If you're on this many projects, then I feel sorry for you, but that's my demo data system. If I choose one of these, I can tell you which task I was working on. I can have internal comments as to how things are going. I can have external comments. Yeah, question over here.
Is there integration into a tool like Harvest?
Into Harvest. I'm not familiar with Harvest. Harvest is actually, I have heard that that's a third-party time. So
it's very popular.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that concept. So a couple things. Certainly, everything across the Dynamics 365 environment is really pretty straightforward to integrate with. I mean, it is some developer activity, but everything is exposed via RESTful OData interfaces, and you can back and forth all sorts of data. And we certainly see it more frequently on expense than on time, because our timesheet's pretty fun too. But more importantly, the thing about timesheets in PSA is that it knows what you're supposed to be doing. So I'm just typing in something here and saying, okay, I worked on this project task for, and in this role, and I can put my internal comments in and I can save it. I can do that in my grid interface that we looked at. But maybe the more important thing is this import from. So where can we source these? I mean, I typed these in, but one place you can source them from is your resource bookings. So resource bookings, that's the action that gets taken when you reserve the person. So we reserved Bernadette or whoever we chose earlier in the demonstration. The minute that happens, all those reservations can show up on your calendar in Exchange. So even if you're not using Outlook, even if you're using your Android first-party calendar, you're going to see that stuff. At the end of the day or the week or whatever, if you just want to say the things that I was supposed to do, I pretty much have done, then you can use this import button, bring in the bookings that you were supposed to do. They're going to flow into this user interface, and then you're going to hit submit. And it's going to aggregate those together and say, okay, this many hours on this many projects. Now, you might see this here and say, oh, I better make a few adjustments there. I was supposed to work 4 hours on Tuesday on project X, and I only worked 2. Or, I'm basically booked. The typical thing is we'll see a lot of bookings. There's a lot of different booking mechanisms you can use in here. You can say, like, 50% per day for this time frame, or 25%, but then you don't actually do that. So when those bookings come in, you have to manipulate them a little bit to say what you actually did. So that's one way that timesheets can be more fun. And my definition of fun is how short it takes to do it, I guess. But there's also another, I keep losing my mouse here. another import source, which is appointments from Exchange. So if you want to bring in calendar items that are on your Exchange calendar and mark those as consuming cost on projects, you can do that as well. So let's look then at the other component here, which is expenses. And expenses is pretty much the same kind of environment. It's pretty straightforward. If you want to say I've got a hotel, let's see, where am I staying? For $400 at, where are we? Orlando? Orlando Ignite. And associate that with my correct project and save this out. And again, I can submit these. And all of the submitted time and expense are coming in and getting routed to the right person for approval. So the approvals are pretty straightforward. Here is all the approvals that are sitting on my plate to approve. I had a bunch of new charts on my new environment I was going to show you here, but there's lots of different ways you might slice this up, right? And say, I want to look at it by resource, or I want to look at it by project. So in this case, if I look at all of the items for this particular project that are pending my approval, I could easily bulk select these and say, go ahead and approve those. I could open up the individual approvals. And I can manipulate, oops, no, because this is a fixed price amount, but if it's a time and material, I can change that billable quantity, so I can have a difference between the submitted amount and the billable amount if I want to take that action at this point in the life cycle. So once we get through approvals, that's when we start seeing real impact on the project. So let me just go back to my project itself. Oops, was that the right? Yeah. And have a look back at what we call the tracking view. And the tracking view is where all this stuff sort of starts coming together. It's going to take those actuals and any reforecasting and apply them to my plan. So if you see the little filled in bars here, that's sort of my progress against these forecasts that I had laid down earlier in the process. And this also gives me the place where I can modify the remaining work. So the remaining work is going to impact my estimate at complete. So we're tracking here what is the estimate at complete and what is the variance between the estimate at complete and my original estimate. So if I switch this view over from effort tracking to say cost tracking and say look at sales rate, this is basically, you've got all these different columns. I can look at my cost variance and say basically this amount of variance is the opportunity cost of that billable person taking more time than we thought they were going to take. So this is sort of your profitability view on your projects. We also have sort of the subjective status. That's another important part of the project, I think. So I can just mark it here, yellow, green. You can track that over time and see how it's changing. Oops, we don't want to leave it empty. That's never pretty. And then we've got these elements, the cost consumption and progress consumption, and whether you're ahead or behind from a budget or effort standpoint, those are real numbers, so you got that kind of mixed view between subjective and objective measures on your project. All the way through, we're always keeping that connection over to the sales part of the world. So if we look into the contract that was built when we said, yep, the customer said yes on the quotation that we were looking at earlier, that contract is where all those costs and revenues are being collected. Let's see if I take a different route here. Okay, so contract's got its same life cycle. For instance, if I do go back here, I see the quote, right, when I click on the qualify piece. Am I running over time? I feel like I need to do some kind of a quiz show answer. Oops, I didn't want to. Let's try. I am gonna. What? Give me one moment. Browser got tired. I don't know what's going on here, folks. I have some funny dialogue up here. There we go. Okay. All right. So my contract here is the thing that is monitoring everything across the different projects that are all rolling up into this agreement. And here we can see sort of that progress of the billing progress, the effort expended across those different projects. And we can navigate over to the invoices. So basically, our invoicing system is going to take any of those. We didn't look at the fixed price milestones, but you put your fixed price milestones in at the beginning of the fixed price project and say, $5,000 prepayment followed by $10,000 on completion of these 3 milestones. Mark those as complete. You put your time and material based ones in. It's going to pick all that ready to invoice components up. And if we look at one of the invoices associated with the contract, you'll see how that sort of works out here. So in this case, I didn't invoice for any of my fixed price work, but going back to my original T&M component here, I can see that bucketed up into the different buckets that we looked at earlier in terms of non-chargeable transactions. So if I had adjusted the billing amount on the time submissions, it's going to show up in this bucket. If I make it as complementary and that I want it to show up on the customer invoice but not charge for it, it would be here. And then all those individual time entries that you might want to format and aggregate and put into some different kind of format when you present it to the customer. So with that, I think we're at the end of the process there. So just kind of picking up from where we were before, we looked at opportunity management, the planning and estimation, staffing. We looked at team collaboration using teams or groups. We looked at collecting time and expense actuals, how that all gets aggregated in the context of a contract and then invoiced out to the customer. So with that, I'll conclude sort of the structured component and just take any further questions that we have from anyone. Yeah?
Does Microsoft have a recommendation set for which processes and functionality will be recommended to be done through the project service automation module versus the project accounts module of the operations?
Yeah, at a very high level in operations, if you have materials-intensive workload that involves a lot of procurement of things other than labor, and you have inventory requirements, things like that, then that's clearly operations. For most if it's time and expense, if it's more like sort of white glove consulting, those industries that we looked at earlier, especially if you don't already have a financial investment in operations, and you're going to bolt that onto a different system other than operations, then that's a clear PSA. If you've got it all running today, right, and you're in one of those industries and you're in operations, you may leave well enough alone. But the way we're looking at it as Microsoft is in those non-materials intensive industries, PSA is the recommended approach. Yeah.
Does this have capabilities for handle things like expense validation, categories, things like that you put in content monitoring?
Yeah, so the question is, what about things like validations and policies and policy frameworks and things that we have? Certainly for expense, I would say that we are seeing some people maintain expense in operations and integrate it over to here because of the policy framework, and because at the end of the day, I know as somebody who's going to be putting an expense report in a few days, my favorite feature is reimbursement. So of course, operations has reimbursements through accounts payable, and obviously we don't have anything like that in here. So if you would use workflows to do the similar things for validations, like if it's greater than this amount and the category is X, then don't allow the save. You can do all of those sides of things, but it's not like a policy framework like what you have in operations. So I think it's a case-by-case basis. If you've already got Concur rolled up and everyone's using that, do the integration, use this for project attribution. And same with that. If you've got policy, same with time expense, if you've got DCAA requirements or something like that, that would be another government contracting, things like that operations would be a better fit for. But for the many, many organizations, many of whom would be partner organizations of ours who are implementing professional services in IT, management consulting, AEC, those kinds of fields that aren't subject to those regulatory environments, then PSA would be the thing. And I think we'll have less and less ambiguity on those answers as the roadmap continues to evolve, but that's kind of the high level right now. Yeah. So the question is the integration into finance and operations only for the enterprise edition, or is it for the business edition? And yes, it's just for enterprise edition. And it's not available today. And I know they're working on it. So we have lots of customers who are doing it, and we can look, and I'm happy to spend time afterwards because I'm done after this, except for going to the party. So we can look at the transaction model. It's very similar to pretty much any ledger system, the transactions that are produced here. So it's really built for integration into that kind of a world. So I don't think we have customers doing it into the business edition today, just through standard integrations. But the CDS-based first-party integration that I'm aware of, at least, is focused on enterprise edition. Yeah.
Does every consultant, do we need to have a license for every consultant?
Yeah, okay, good question. So the question's about licensing, and I'll give the super high-level answer on licensing. Basically, Dynamics 365 is licensed through either plans or through apps or through team members. The consultants, you can model any resource. You can model a chair in the resource management. You can model subcontractors. You can model anything. Those things don't have to be licensed. If they're going to enter time or view the project data, view the project schedule, they need a team member license at the low end of the price, like $8 US list price sort of area. If they are doing the other functions, then they either need the PSA license or the team or the plan license, which I think is called Customer Engagement Plan license now. And if you've got more than 95 or so users, then you're going to want to use those plan licenses because that gives you access to everything, including PSA. And that's what you need if you're going to manage opportunities, manage projects, build new contracts, do any of that sort of stuff.
Quick follow-up, is there a way to kind of go to a calculator to model all that?
I don't know. I don't know an answer to that question. I think I've heard that there is, but I haven't used it myself. So, yeah. Yeah.
Will there be any integration between Project Task and Planner?
Oh, I hope so. The question is about project tasks and Planner. I have actually tried to do this myself a little bit as a side project in Flow. We're talking to the teams about this. A lot of people ask the question. I think it's a fabulous capability. I hope to see that soon. I don't know of a concrete. I know we're talking about it. That's all I know. But I think that ability to take the high-level buckets of cost in PSA and then execute on them in an agile fashion in Planner is a great thing, and I hope we see it soon. But good question. All right, well, we're at the end of the time, so thanks for your time. Please fill out your evaluations and have fun at the party tonight, and come up if you have any more questions.